was fast. Well, you take direction well, so that's a good way to start, right? Excellent. Okay. I'm going to go over a few things. A lot of what we're going to talk about today are just try to define terms and have a common understanding. As I'm talking, feel free to raise your hand or stop me if I use an acronym you don't know what it is or something. Just say, hey, can we talk about that? Or if you have an interesting point to make and whatever, I'm happy to have this be more interactive than a lecture. It's more fun that way anyway. Okay, so we're going to go through the course objectives real quick. These are in the syllabus, but I just want to make a few points as we're doing the overview of this particular course. So obviously we need to understand why sustainability is important in order to promote this as an area that we want to see more of. And I want you to be aware of your current knowledge, define sustainable design and sustainability. And the first assignment in this course is for you to write your philosophy of sustainable design. And you're like, well, am I a philosopher? Do I get to, of course you do. This is your own story. And it's partly a story of what brought you to this place. Because, not everybody strives for, I want to learn more about sustainability. So you're unique in that way, and I want you to explore that as you're starting in this program, because I think it's going to help you when the times get tough. It's like, oh God, it's midnight, and I got to get this paper on Blackboard, and understanding your passion and where that comes from, I think will help you. The 6 principles that we use in this course have been around for a long time. A lot of people have modified versions of this. But I really like these 6 principles as a framework to look at sustainability. And the idea is if you do all these things, you can use those as a measure to evaluate a project or even just a decision. Does this respect the 7 generations? And the way I look at it, going backwards and going forwards. Do we capture the history of the capital while we are talking about solar panels in the future? And how do you do those 2 things simultaneously? So we'll go through those 6. We're going to spend some time today and tomorrow talking about them. Because for your second assignment, you are going to analyze a project using these 6 principles. And I think that's a great way to kind of get your feet wet in the program and looking at things from a kind of that broader perspective. And at the conclusion, we'd like for you to have an increased awareness of the water cycle. Lauren said there's a whole class dedicated to trying to design stormwater. It's this free thing that falls out of the sky, and we try to get rid of it as soon as we can. Get it off, get it off! When it's a resource that we should be valuing and figuring out how to work into our designs. Cradle to grave versus cradle to cradle, we're going to have lots of time to talk about that. I think this is a concept that is starting to get woven into design thinking, so that's a good thing. Watersheds are a critical thing to understand, and we're going to actually delineate a watershed on a topography map today. Or I should say, you are going to delineate watersheds on a map today. And that's the essential kind of unit that we use going through the program, is what's in that watershed and how do all those things relate. And then recognize different ways that sustainability is assessed. How buildings contribute to a sustainable environment. I'm not talking about myself here, but Lauren's not wrong when she says that the instructors in this program are top-notch. They are best in their field. One of them is Laureen Arnold, who's going to come in the February weekends to talk about green buildings. She's an architect in Prince George's County, also a championship kayaker. So we'll get to hear her perspective on green buildings and what's changing. Sustainable communities, importance of diversity. Part of my background being a planner is I look at the larger scale. And one of the things we're going to talk about, especially in this course, is this idea of scale. You know, from the small site to the Chesapeake Bay. How are these things related? And how can you make that relationship stronger? That's a big part of sustainable design. Economic and human health benefits. This is partly, in my mind, how you sell it. How do you get people to do the right thing? You were talking about how do we get these elected officials to do the right thing? We have to understand where we come from in order to convince other people, right? So part of what this course hopefully will do is to help you get more grounded in your understanding of sustainability so you can convince other people that this is clients or elected officials or people in your community that, you know, this is the right thing to do. So today we're going to set the stage, all those things. Tomorrow we're going to look at methods of evaluating the role of water, all those good things. On day 3 we're going to talk about assignment 1. We're going to come in and we're going to talk about your sustainable philosophy papers a little bit in depth, because you will have commented on other students' papers online. Then we can come together and have a little more in-depth discussion about that. Out of all the things in this course, that's kind of my favorite thing, is to come back and go, oh yeah, Lisa, I read your paper and that was really cool how you did, you know, whatever. So it's the idea of fertilizing each other in a way. You know, it's like, oh yeah, did you see this link to this? That kind of interaction is really positive. I also like to talk about environmental justice. It's an issue that fortunately or unfortunately is going to become much more important, I think, in the future as we look at land use decisions and, you know, where does that new trash transfer station go? Really critical questions in an urban environment. We're going to talk about green buildings, as I said, different scales, economic and social benefits. We're really going to do this from what I would call a 20,000 foot level. At that level scale, we're going to go down in scale and back up. I hope I don't give you motion sickness as we, you know, go up and down in scales, but I'll try to keep you with me as we do that. So let's work at the very largest scale for a minute. Let's talk at that level. So in 1987, sustainability was first being talked about. It was this paper called Our Common Future. If you ever can't sleep at night, it's a great little read. But it's also really profound for the time that was, 1987. That was like, we got lots of resources, no problem. Oh, the economy, who was president then? Reagan? Oh, the economy, you know, it's all good. I was still doing landscaping because I couldn't get a job using my bachelor's degree in forestry, you know. So it was not that not a time when you would think that people would be going, hey, sustainability, we need to think about this. So sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Wow. What's kind of wrapped up in that statement? Let's take a minute. Let's take a minute and talk about that. Future needs. What would you need to know to be able to address that? What counts as a need? And how much of it? So are we talking about natural resources? Are we talking about water? Are we talking about water? I could go on for days. Are we talking about soil? Are we depleting the soil so bad that it won't let other people meet their needs? Other thoughts? Climate change. So we would need to know what the needs of the present are and what the future needs will be. That's the equation. What are the future needs and how can we protect those things that they will need? One of the things I get hung up on a little bit is electronics. You know, I have a friend who's always the upgrader. You know, it's like, hey, I got my new iPhone 7, I got a selfie stick, I got 4 iPods, you know, I'm good to go. And of course, I'm thinking all the metals, the precious metals that go into electronics and frequently don't get recycled back out, that's not sustainable, right? So can we do that differently and still let the future people meet their own needs? But what would we have to, we'd have to have a crystal ball. Are they even going to use electronics in the future? Are they going to use them like they're using them, like we're using them today? Who knows? I do a lot of movie references, so I'm sorry, but I'll tell you, and then you should go see the movie Matrix, the movie Matrix, where it's a futuristic movie, right? And he plugs in this little plastic disc, and there's a hologram. And it's very sad. His little boy has died, and here's this hologram. And I'm like, well, that's really cool. Is that what's next for us? I love it that Hollywood's always like one step ahead of us. But what would we need to know? We'd need to know what their needs are. And that's a hard question. But it's also a simple question. What does life need to survive? Very basic question.
Clean air.
Clean air. Food. Shelter.
Water.
Clean water. Those are yeah.
Sunlight.
Sunlight. These are all things that sustainability is all about. So if we really took it to the, down into its essence, we would say water and soil and vegetation. These are the things we need to preserve. I don't know if it made me feel better or worse, but I heard recently that the country of Norway has a storage vault of seeds that any country can come and make a deposit for free. These are the ecosystem seeds, and it's like in this vault in a mountain. Well, on the one side, it scares the crap out of me, right? Because that's doomsday stuff that they're, saving the seed. But on the other hand, I go, well, people in the future are going to be able to grow food and be able to replicate this stuff because we thought enough to look at what their needs are going to be in the future. So that's the kind of mind-expanding piece of this, right? So then it gets into the concept of needs, in particular the world's poor. We're not giving them overriding priority, although so much is happening regarding water harvesting and other methods of providing those sustainable elements. And that there's limitations imposed by the state of technology. Wow. Do we think there's limitations on technology? Desalinization, I'll use as an example. Everybody said desalinization, too expensive, taking salt out of ocean water so it can become fresh water. Somebody came up with a way to do it. I haven't read up on it, but it's one of those where you catch the last of the NPR story and you're like, oh, I need to look that up. Desalinization is now becoming affordable. So what does that do for Southern California? Does that throw this whole thing on its head? California wants to secede from the Union. I love it. They're like, bro, we're not doing this. And could they? They could be completely self-sustaining because they grow all the food. If you want almonds, that's what you got to have. But if the water equation can change like that, that would be huge. That would be huge. So there's a way to shift that thing. Anyway, what I want to challenge you to and kind of stretch your mind about is thinking in these 20, 30, 50-year time frames. Because you know what? Adam, what was like the last tree you planted? What species?
We planted sycamore, katsura, and the Shumard oak.
Okay, let's take sycamore. Lifespan. 100 years?
100 years.
Yeah. In theory, if we gave it enough soil space and all those good things, 100 years. We should be thinking in those time frames, at least momentarily, to say, should I plant a cherry here that might live 25, 30 years, or should I plant a large shade tree that could last up to 100 years? And, you know, what about climate change? I'm in, there's this thing called zone hardiness. So like plants, they've labeled different areas with numbers, and they go from like Florida is 9, and up at the top of the US is 1, and different plants can grow in different climates, right? Well, you know, we're in zone 7, kind of B-ish here, soon to be zone 8. So in this area, should you be planting, for example, white pines? Very on the edge of their range here. Not really part of their natural range anyway. And things are getting warmer as you move north. So in 100 years, should you be planting that tree? That's kind of what I want to expand your mind around, thinking in these larger time frames. So we're going to talk about a lot about these 3 pillars of sustainability. Okay? Social, economic, and environment. And how does sustainability address all 3 of these things? The 6 principles can also be dropped into these 3 categories. So I really like these 3 legs to the stool as a way to analyze projects, a way to say, is this decision really sustainable? We'll get into that in more detail. So I like our author from Cradle to Cradle says, design is the first signal of human intention. What kind of world will we leave future generations? Will we leave them one where you can be plopped down on any highway anywhere and you don't know where you are? Because there's a McDonald's, there's a Burger King, there's a Wendy's, there's a Best Buy, there's a Staples, there's all these big box stores, right? And they all look just the same. You could be anywhere. There's a great urban planner by the name of Ed McMahon, not the Ed McMahon that gives out, that used to be on TV, which most of you don't even know who I'm talking about. But he's great. He's a great speaker, and his whole thing is, why does every McDonald's have to look the same? If you're going into a community in Connecticut, should that McDonald's look the same as one that's in Tucson? We've lost all that vernacular of place, and we're going to talk about why that vernacular of place is so important. But, you know, what do we want to tell future generations? That we love fast food and we don't love design? Or Groucho Marx will say, if we keep going the way we're going, we're going to end up where we're headed. Kind of simple and silly statement, but it's true. We need to shift the thinking. And I have to say that I've been so heartened. We've done this program, I can't remember whether it's 9 years or 10 years at this point. Our first cohort was in 2007, but we used to do it starting in the fall. But anyway, even in that amount of time, so much has changed. So that's what also gives me hope, is that if so much change can happen in that 10 years, and even today, we have so much more technology than we had 10 years ago. So I think that exponential kind of change should give us hope. So, so why is sustainability important? I used to play a section from An Inconvenient Truth in this class, because nobody explains global warming better than Al Gore. So if you're interested, I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix. You can see it various places. He provides a lot of science, and I'm a planner that believes that if you want to convince someone to do something, well, at least that's how it was in the past. Maybe it's different now, but you gotta bring the science. You gotta say, elected officials in Prince George's County, we need more tree canopy because we have the highest asthma rates of any county in the state of Maryland. Do you know somebody who has asthma? Do you know somebody who has asthma? You start asking, and they're like, oh yeah, my nephew has asthma. And you make that connection between human health and environmental health. So it's that kind of, You know, how do you make something relevant to somebody's life? So this is what I think is funny. 74% of people think climate change is a problem, but only 68% think global warming is a problem. It's messaging. It's how you say what you want to say, right? And our communications expert, right? How do you convince someone is you have to use words that mean something to them. When I talk to elected officials, I don't use either of these terms. I talk about extreme weather events. When was the last time we had an extreme weather event? I don't know if you guys got the rain that we just got in Western Mass. We had like 4 inches of rain, and the ground's frozen. Isn't that nice? So of course I get on Facebook and I go, no matter where you live, oh, because 12 states were in this storm that came through, 12 states were having weather advisories. So I get on Facebook and I'm like, if you have a storm drain inlet in front of your house, go now, please, and make sure that it's open. Because that's how flooding happens. Ground's frozen, there's snow all over the grates, or there's leaves from last fall, and you know, just little things like that that make such a difference. And people get really tired of my Facebook page, so I created, my friends are like, shut up about the environment already. So I created one called Conservation Junkies. And if you would like to like my page, Conservation Junkies, plural, I just put all kinds of just little videos and things that I think are interesting, so that my friends and family won't unfriend me from being such a green loudmouth. But it's not just the overall temperatures, it's these storm events. And you know, one of the biggest problems, and we're going to talk about water and other things. Oh, so so I need to switch screens here, Karen. How do I do that? What are you doing? Tab? Okay. How do you do this? Okay. No.
Because you're working on 2 screens, so
Oh, if this is going to be too hard, I can just.
click the link within that.
It doesn't work. When I click on that link, it doesn't work. That's why I pulled them all up ahead of time.
Can you right click on that link? Within here?
It's not coming up.
Yeah, mouse is approved here. So,
You might as well drive because I'm not getting us where we need to go.
up here now.
That's what I was saying. I already have everything pulled up, and it's playing. Okay, we'll practice this at the break because I have several. Oh, there you go. You make it full screen and start it at the beginning. And we need volume. Oh wait, pause it if we don't have volume. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh. Oh. Don't. Okay, so that's it. Oh, sorry. All right, so we'll try to make that more smooth. Sorry, that wasn't as smooth as it could have been. But sometimes you just need something funny to make a point, and I think that really has some value there. Let me get back to my slides. Okay, there we go. Is that me driving? Is it moving? Okay. When she gets that back up. Okay. Not as smooth as we would have liked, but we're back in action. Okay.
So is the presentation on Blackboard after the lecture?
It will be, yes.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
that's, we're taking it. Right, for that purpose, yeah.
No, but the actual slides are,
Oh, yeah, oh, the slides, yes,
Yeah.
I will also put the PowerPoints up. Yeah.
that helps with note taking.
Okay, yeah. So, let's talk about this concept of old solar capital for a minute. I've tried to explain this to non-sustainability people, and sometimes I get a bit of a puzzled look. What is old solar capital that we're using like it grows on trees? Well, they were trees once. Old solar, ancient solar capital. Ancient solar rays that hit the earth millions of years ago. Fossil fuels, right. Any kind of fossil fuel is old solar capital. Because in theory, how coal gets made is that there were, at one point, there was vegetation, and then there was heat, and, you know, the chemical processes happened on the earth, and the coal, so the coal, all energy was originally solar energy. It's just how long ago do you think about, how long ago was it created? Because all fossil fuel, that energy came from the sun. Okay, so, but we're dropping it like it's hot. You know, I just retired. If I start spending money like crazy, I'm never gonna get to the end. My mother lived to be 92 years old. I'm in trouble. I got, you know, what, 30 more years I gotta support myself on this earth. So if I start spending my capital the way we spend our fossil fuels, we're not gonna make it to the end. And what was it in Obama's speech? He said we get 50% of our energy from renewable sources. I wanted to fact check that because I'm wondering if he means just the federal government or the larger royal we. But a huge change has happened. I was lucky enough to buy a house with solar panels on it. Let me tell you, the owner had just put them in and owns them. They're not rented. And boy, she didn't want to come down on the price at all, because it was $20,000 to put those in. And, you know, she'll never recover that cost. But we are, our electric bills are like 20 bucks a month. They're nothing. And I just got a check for 250 bucks for carbon credits. I didn't even know I was getting carbon credits. So, you know, that kind of stuff, what a motivation for someone to do it, aside from it's the right thing to do. So, yeah, that's solar capital. The U.S. alone has lost 50% of its wetlands. 50% of our wetlands. That just blows me away. Do you know why that number is so big? Do you know what the federal government regulates with regard to wetlands and what they do not? Or they, for a long period it was this way? Wetlands that are connected to watercourses are regulated. Isolated by the federal government. Isolated wetlands, as came through a famous court case in like 1987 or something, are not regulated by the federal government. Isolated wetlands make up a huge percentage of the wetlands that are out there. I don't know what the percentage is, but those isolated wetlands you're going to find all over in the landscape. So that, you know, that's a big difference. Oh, and the forest, the poor forest. You know, when we talk about old growth forests, I'm using air quotes here, old growth. There's nothing in the United States that's old growth. Every forest in the United States has been cut over at least once, you know, from historic times, okay? So, yeah, but these are areas where some of the forests existed over time, and now we're down to this patchwork quilt. On the map, the dark green are public forests, and the light green are private forests. How much does that scare you about sustainability over time? Some of the private forests do have easements on them, which would prevent them from being exploited, not necessarily not timber harvested, but exploited, made into subdivisions. So some of it is protected. But that's a bit of a scary thought. Oops.
Can you define, I mean, I think I know what it is, but just to be sure, the difference between public and private forests?
Public and private forests. So the U.S. Forest Service, back in the early days, and the Park Service both said, we're going to protect these forests, but the Forest Service said, we're going to implement, my bachelor's degree is in forestry, this multiple use of forests. So we're going to allow logging, but we're also going to allow recreation. But these are the forests for the people, if you will. Private forests are like the 4 acres on my property in Maryland when I lived there, the 12 acres that I am the custodian of in Western Mass, all those private forests. But if you can link them together and do protection in a meaningful way, that's really big. That's large landscape conservation that I'm also interested in and ways to do that. So yeah, so public and private is a problem. These are, don't pay attention to the scale. Just know that dark green is where the number of at-risk species that are associated with private forests. So those are rare, threatened, endangered species that are on private forests. The dark green are the worst, as I'm reading this. Yeah.
Count species that are like extinct or have been completely displaced.
Does it include extinct or the species that we've already lost? No, it doesn't.
The areas that are paler could be because there are less animals there in general.
Could be because there's less animals in some of these areas in general. Good point, good point. And our culture is transforming from citizens to consumers. My upgrader friend, is like, oh, you gotta get this new upgrade, gotta always have, the best, newest, whatever. I held on to my flip phone so long that my friends just ridiculed me every time I pulled it out. And it wasn't because I didn't want the new technology, it's that this was still working just fine, thank you very much. I can't throw anything out that's still working just fine. So that's really a problem. And what do you, so let's talk about that 20, 30 years in the future. What do you think retail is going to be in the future? Or is already now?
Mostly online, moving to the Ethernet.
Right. So it's virtual stores instead of real stores.
Coming your way via drones.
Via drones, right, right. And personally, I don't think that's ever going to take off. Too many obstacles for that, literal and figuratively and legally and all kinds of stuff. But drones are doing really cool stuff for the environment. A friend of mine works at the University of Vermont, and he comes from a military background, talk about intersectionality. He's from a military background, and he learned how to do these drones, and he does unique ecosystem assessments, like places that you don't want to walk through or you can't walk through because they're so wetlands. So he sends these drones in to do all this stuff. And then the federal government calls him up and goes, hey, there was this train wreck in this rural area. We can't get to the people on the train. Can you use your drone to look at, assess what the damage is? So just it's such a cool application that can cross into social benefits as well. And oh boy, waste producers. Are we waste producers? Who here has been to a landfill? Yeah. Smells good, huh? Even a trash transfer station. Have you been downwind of one of those? I used to work by a trash transfer station in Fairfax, and what they do is all the trash trucks come and dump all their stuff in this big kind of concrete pit, and then a big loader loads it up into tractor trailers and takes it down to the I-95 landfill down by Lorton. Unbelievable way to measure waste, or to deal with waste. I like to brag about Prince George's because we're leaders in so many things, and you never hear